for joining us for episode 9 of Bell to Bell podcast. If you want to see us on in the flesh, we're on VIP YouTube, or if we're three gentlemen who have faces for radio, just have a listen on Spotify where you can download, listen to it in the car, trains, wherever you like. I'm Steve Lillis. This week we have my co-host and great pal, top boxing journalist, John Evans, one of the most knowledgeable guys around, but alongside him, a true boxing college of knowledge. He's Sir Les Ferdinand's golfing partner, a man who challenged 3 times to the British title in a long career. It is now developing young fighters and training them and working, keeping people fit. And one thing we do say on this podcast, he's another one of the guests we've had along who we don't see giving their expert advice on TV. Gary Shogun Logan.
How you doing, mate? Nice
to
be here. Pleasure, absolute pleasure, mate.
Good to see you, and good to have you on here, because you know what, for those people who don't know you, you really do know your boxing, and you're up there, and you're one of these guys. I mean, I know bits of history. I'm not a great boxing historian, but when I hear you and Spencer Fearon go on, it's like listening to someone like me. It's like listening to two, when you hear train spotters talking codes on a platform. That's what it's like.
That's a very good analogy. That's a very good analogy. But I'll tell you what, right? I've been so blessed, because boxing came into my life at a very young age, way before I was even allowed to box. I used to go to this library. I used to live in Clapham, and I used to live in Clapham Common, Old Town, and we had the library right at the top of the road, Orlando Road, and I was always in there, and I bucked up on this. Yeah, I remember bucking up on this book, and it had Muhammad Ali on the cover, and it's just like it was a book for kids. This is how amazing it was. It was like an easily readable book for kids, so kids got to know who Muhammad Ali was. Got to remember, this is like me at about 9 or 10 years old. So you got to remember, a 10-year-old kid already knows about Muhammad Ali, and that was it. I was obsessed with him when he was on the telly. Remember, he used to have TV adverts. Champ Burger used to be a Champ Burger. He did various adverts, and at one point, at that time, he was the most famous man on the planet, other than the president of Russia and the president of the United States. That's how big he was. So I used to go to school, and if I got in a fight, I'd try and box my way out of the fight. I wasn't having a row and trying to bite their ear off or anything. I was probably using my left jab and everything, So, but Mum unfortunately wouldn't allow me to box until I ironically got chucked out the soccer team for fighting. So that's when it all started at 13.
Good stuff. Well, you've been good for boxing, that long career that we was on about, and now we're going to hear a lot of your thoughts on some current topics. Are you okay, John, as well? I see you got your hands of stone.
I'm good, yeah. I wore my Roberto Duran t-shirt to make Gary feel at home, because I know it's his favourite.
Hey, look, Gary,
you know what? Let's pause it and let me go and put my one on.
Right.
Oh, that's a top.
For you, those you listening to Bell for the first time, it's a bit different. It's very quick. This podcast, video cast, 6 topics over 6 3-minute rounds. And if you're still talking at the end of 3 minutes, what happens, John Evans? And simple as that, really. John always has the first topic, I'm afraid, Gary. But Barry Jones elbowed him aside last week, and he wasn't a happy John Evans. He threatened to jack and wouldn't do a grand podcast for VIP again. There's all sorts he wouldn't do. John's a quiet man, but he's like one of these lovies, these journalists who say, I'm the press. John can be a bit like that. So I'm sorry, Gary. John's got to go first this week, and you'll have to be second.
Not
John,
a problem.
fire away.
Not a problem.
Ready? Well, let's start off with Dickens' Christmas Carol and Jazza Dickens last week. The first time I saw Jazza Dickens was at Oldham Sports Centre, and you get all the kids walking into the latest rap or terrible dance music and stuff like that these days. And this kid walked into Peter Gabriel's Salisbury Hill, and he was different straight away. And he had the footwork, he had the angles. He was a different fighter. You get to know Jazza, and you get to know about just how hard he had it. You hear some tough stories about people growing up in the States, but Jazza's story beats everyone's. You then get to meet him in different scenarios. I've seen him in front of 10 people at Liverpool Olympia. I've seen him on dinner shows talking to Medinas with his hand wraps on. I've seen him in his dressing room after Kid Galahad beat him in tears. There's been times when he's been the only man on the planet chasing Rigondo. And then last Wednesday, he finally put it together. He didn't get involved in a messy brawl. He showed his footwork. He showed his brains. He boxed really well. And he made what on paper was a 50-50 into a bit of a breakout performance. I was really pleased for Jazza.
Yeah, with Jazza, for me, what's impressed me, and by the way, I'll have a quick plug here. If you want to learn his backstory, you don't know it, as a Box Nation Meets Jazza Dickens on YouTube that I made, and it's quite incredible stuff. You know, the background of his family and how they, you know, his dad particularly has come through this. But what I love about Jazza is how not to write him off. I remember that more than 8 years ago, when he fought Kid Galahad. He was the big prospect, and Galahad was someone else, and he just gassed that night. He fell apart, and I thought he would never ever make it. And there's a great example of people like me, and I did at the time, wrong, you know, dismiss him as one for the future because he'd had such a big build-up.
What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other night I thought he was absolutely superb. You know, I don't think I gave Walsh a round until about round 5. You know, he was edging him, but he just looked the classier guy. And every time Walsh did try to up it and up the gears, you know, Jazza had another gear for him. You know, the movement was superb. Listen, the game's about hitting and not getting hit, and he more than exemplified that the other night. It was a superb performance. It was a real coming out performance. But you know what? When you look at his experience and who he's fought, he's had the losses to Galahad, he's had the losses to Rigondo. But I know we get so enamored with the unbeaten record, but it's the losses that normally shape you as a fighter. You know, it's the losses. You've got to go through the loss to really, really shape you as a fighter. You know, some fighters are blessed that they can go through a career near unbeaten, and good for them. But, you know, for your meat and potatoes sort of guys, like a Jazza Dickens that hasn't had the big, oh, there you go.
There we go, round to next topic, Steve.
Your first one, Gary. What's that going to be tonight?
Let's talk Yarde and Arthur.
Yeah. Go on.
Going into the fight, I said Yarde is 7 to 10 rounds, but I did put a big if. I tweeted it. I said if he gets and solves the jab that he didn't solve against Kovalev. Yeah, and he didn't solve Kovalev's jab, and he didn't solve Arthur's jab, and that's to his detriment. Started too late. Started coming on far too late. Obviously, he's won his fair few share of rounds, but I just had Arthur just nicking it with that jab. And the most damaging thing I think for Yarde at this point in his career is the fact that he had to know after 5 or 6 rounds that this man was beating him only with one hand, or this man was only throwing one hand, and he still couldn't solve that puzzle. And I always say with boxers, you've got to, in order to go up the levels in boxing, you've got to have a decent jab, because the jab will take you around the world, and you've got to be able to stop the jab. And he was able to not to do either, unfortunately, in this fight.
Yeah, you know, I think what he looked, you know, he's obviously a brilliant athlete, but the other night, even if he had,
yes.
You know, what we've seen 2 weeks running now in fights is fighters that have learnt that jab at Team GB. Joe Joyce last week, Lyndon Arthur when he was at GB and in the WSB. Now, and he was up against the guy the other night. Now, if he only had 12 amateur fights, Yarde, and I don't think they were the greatest level. John or yourself might educate me a bit more on that.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been taught a jab. He hasn't been taught these basics at all. What has shown me, Yarde, if he taught something, he could be a hell of a fighter.
Oh, he could.
For me, sorry to cut you. He and Buatsi are by far the best athletes in the light heavyweight division. Yeah, they are the best athletes. But I would say Buatsi's Team GB background puts him ahead of Anthony's power. Buatsi's got the boxing background and the fundamentals in place to get himself out of trouble. And as we know, as I said to you before, the jab will take. You've nailed it on the head, Arthur. Buatsi, they've learned. Even AJ gets pilloried for not being the boxer that Tyson Fury is. But I keep saying to people, that's for another day. He's going to shock Fury with that jab. I'm telling you, he's going to shock him with that jab because he's got the fundamentals in place. And this is what Anthony needed to have. And maybe Tunde's worked on the other attributes of Anthony, his athleticism, his power, his ability normally to make somebody miss and then make them pay. But we didn't see that in this fight, and unfortunately, he's come out the wrong end of it.
Yeah, just a couple of seconds left. I think we should give a shout for Lyndon, how well he held himself together, especially with that arm and hand injury. Ice cool. Steve?
Yeah, my first topic, no hurry for Murray. This is a guy I've got quite close to, Martin Murray, over the last few years. We've had a lot of chats about things in life in general. Not, he's one of the few boxers I speak to, and when we chat, we don't really talk boxing. It's more life. And he's hinted at retirement before. He's hinted at it again, but never quite done it. And I'm scared that if that money offer comes in, he'll come back and he'll have one fight too many against a young prospect looking for a ranking. And he's already getting known by a lot of people as a high-end gatekeeper. I mean, if you look at his world title, he drew with Sturm. Then he had the Martinez, Golovkin, Alpha Abraham, Billy Joe Saunders, all defeats. And let's not forget the George Groves loss as well. So all, which wasn't a world title, all high end. But apart from the Martinez fight, he didn't win any of them, even though it was a Sturm draw. It was one of those in Germany where Sturm did enough. And what worries me about Martin Maybox again from our chats, we haven't chatted for a while, was 2-3 years ago, I did a show with him at BT. And we were both, in the car going back to Euston Station afterwards, and we were chatting about boxing, and Martin knew what he was after, getting a few quid, and he wasn't going to train fighters. It was all about his family. I don't know how well you know him, Gary. I know John knows him well. And they're making enough money and getting some properties and all that, which I think he's done. But over the last year and a half, he's gradually fallen in love more with boxing. He's training kids. He's going to go in corners. We were speaking the other week and telling me how he's enjoying it a lot more than a few years ago, where he was thinking, right, what is there for me financially? And I'm just worried he might just carry on too long. Because at the end now, if he retires now, he was never a world champion, but what a career for a guy who just really tells you, what a career for someone who won an ABA title and went to jail. He was on the run when he won the ABAs. And to turn his life around and make money from boxing has been superb. I'm just frightened that he'll just carry on now, and it worries me.
It's the lure of boxing, isn't it? You just never know when to say no. You never know when to just walk away, because the life, the money that it can give you in one fight. As you said, if he's going to be a gatekeeper, somebody will have to pay him a decent sum of money in order to have that sort of gatekeeper fight against a young, up-and-coming and possibly dangerous super middleweight. And as I said, this is probably, short of robbing banks, this is what's turned his life around. It's given him the income never to have to even ever think about making the mistakes that he made in his young life. So the history of boxing, mate, they all go on too long. They all go on too long. Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, they all do it. It's just the way it is.
It is. Let's go about Pat Barrett and Black Flash Promotions.
Yeah.
This is a rise from absolute nothing. Zelfa's very keen on saying we're diamonds in the dirt. We've got talent, but we're down amongst the real dirt in the gutter, and we need polishing up. And Pat, Tommy McDonough, Frank McDonough, Chris Mailer, who never gets a shout up at Black Flash, they saw potential in these kids in this gym 7 or 8 years ago now, and started working away with Zelfa, Lyndon, Sean Ben Mulligan, Matty Ryan and people like that. They started putting on their own shows, and they've all come up together. They've all learnt together. Pat, if you've been in the gym with him, he must be, I know Lyndon said at weekend, it's love-hate. I think he's a very demanding trainer. If you don't get it right, he'll spend an hour going over the same little footwork, the same little, make sure your knuckles are turned over to the right degree. He'll just, I got a bollocking last week for talking to Zelf while he was skipping. He's a very, very demanding Pat. But I think Pat's grown as a trainer. The gym's all grown. And I thought, weekend for Pat to guide through Lyndon Arthur through a fight with one hand against Anthony Yard. I think it showed just how far Pat's come as a trainer, how far the gym's come. And let's just hope we can bring the next wave through now.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, you know,
go on, Gary.
so mate, me and Pat go way back. Mickey Duff sent me up there to spar with him when he was European champion, you know. And I mean, Pat could bang, and he had a wonderful jab, great body puncher. He had it all. The only thing he didn't have, and he'll admit it to you, that he didn't have the commitment that it took to go to the next level. He was easily distracted at that time. I found him quite easily distractible, and he'll admit that now. And so these mistakes that he's made, it's just the same as we're sort of parallel in that way, that we understand boxing more so now as coaches, because we understand the mistakes that he's made. Luckily for Pat, he was talented enough to embrace and take advantage of winning the British and European title. But, you know, this is what now makes Pat that sort of coach, the one that's dotting the I's, crossing the T's. He is not letting them boys do anything wrong. He's meticulous in his preparation, and we see that. You know, we saw that in the corner. I mean, his corner work was superb the other night. He just kept making this guy stay disciplined and stay with that jab. The only stupid thing Linda did, as I said, was throw that stupid right uppercut in the last round where he nearly got chinned as a consequence. But other than that, that, you know, I'm so happy for them that they've broken through, and long may it continue.
Yeah, just I know we're running out of time on this one, but what I also want to credit Pat for, and he was brilliant in the corner the other night, simple instructions and calmly given, but it's how he guided guys like Lyndon on the right path. Lyndon's brother, sorry, not Lyndon, Zelfa's brother got, Zelfa Barrett's brother was murdered, you know, Pat's nephew, cousin, no, Pat's cousin, and he just guided it, he made sure he put him on a great path. Gary, your final topic.
Second topic, Gary.
I've got it. Oh my God. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Spence Garcia.
Great fight of the weekend. What we're talking about. Great fight of the weekend. Spence and Danny Garcia. Really good trade fight. And when I say trade fight, allow me to break into it. These guys, they think they're pay-per-view. But me and you, Steve, we grew up in an era when it was real pay-per-view. The man in the street knew who these guys were. Yeah. Unfortunately for these guys, they want pay-per-view money, but the man in the street don't know who they are, you know, because maybe their press team are not working hard to make them cross over. When we had pay-per-view fights in our time, super fights as they were, these guys had crossed over into the general public's consciousness. But that's for another discussion for another day. The fight went exactly as I thought it would. Spence being smarter with his jab than previously given credit for, doing everything off his jab, and he's an insane work rate in the middle range when he just goes up the gears, doesn't he? You know, I mean, he's done it to Kell Brook on a night when I think Kell Brook beats many of the best welterweights of that era at that time. He did it to Sean Porter in a classic as well, when Sean Porter probably boxed the best we've ever seen him. And he did it to Danny Garcia, who looked really good the other night in little pockets, really good counter punching, good body shots, but he just couldn't sustain it because Spence just drags it out of you. He's just incessant. He just keeps coming.
Yeah. Fantastic. I was really pleased with Errol Spence because we spoke about this last week. There was questions about how he'd come back because that wasn't just a shunt at a set of traffic lights. That was a potential life-ending crash. But there was no worries about stamina. He wasn't gun shy. There was nothing. He was the old Errol Spence. Maybe he was better than ever because he dominated Danny Garcia to such an extent. And let's just hope we do get a super fight, Crawford against Spence.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing? What I love about him and Derek James is the Errol Spence that you see on the pads is exactly the Errol Spence you see on Fight Night. Yeah. There's none of this flashy pads and none of this. He doesn't deviate from what he does well, mate. Their pad work is insane. I mean, he doesn't stop punching for like 25 minutes, does he?
No, it's all fight scenarios, isn't it? It's fight scenarios played out on the pads.
Yeah, brilliant. Running out of time, and I think with something you both touched on, it'd be shocking if we don't see Spence Crawford in 2021. But something Gary mentioned, for us, that's like boxing porn. But how do you sell that to the American public to pay 70 quid? You know, how do you get a British TV company to pay $2 million for it?
Yeah.
My final topic is fighters who might break down now. you know, will boxers, because some boxers become old or lose something overnight because of the COVID layoff? You know, boxing is getting busier now. You know, I'm wondering how many fighters, you know, the sport's going to lose. I think I touched on this briefly with John on Saturday night. You know, Michael Ramabeletsa, you know, I know he's late 30s. That was a shop-worn fighter then in the other night, and a shadow of the man who has beaten 3 unbeaten fighters. I think it was Joe Echo, Indy Sangaharan, Ryan Walker, is it? He beat in his last 3 outings, and a 12-month playoff in his late 30s, you know, is going to be hard against him. But how many fighters do you think could be affected by this layoff? I wonder for even elite guys over 30. You know, even you know, Josh Warrington when he returns. You know, he was at that peak where fighters have an 18-month of being unstoppable. And will he have lost anything in that year when he comes back against? I think they're playing in Kanzu for early February. He was at his peak when the layoff come, and you know, you had I think you, Gary, had 5 years out after Ensley Bingham, and then you still come back and fought Jamie Moore. You had that mad Sunday afternoon against Spencer Fearon, which we were talking about earlier. Do you think
Hussein Osman? I had Hussein Osman that got voted Fight of the Year. Do you remember that?
That was after it, wasn't it? You know what?
Yeah, it was after Spencer.
That was second. We did the second fight after it.
Yeah, second fight after. Yeah.
I just wondered if you think that, you particularly, Gary, you think we're going to lose a lot of fighters who are going to become old overnight because of COVID?
You know what? It's down to one thing: how are they keeping themselves in shape, and are they staying fresh? So the fights that were leading up to COVID, were they wars? If you're getting hit a lot in sparring, and you're consequently getting hit a lot in the fight, then you are gonna start slowing. It's inevitable. But this is where the art of the game comes in, and you've got to be a lot more cleverer. So the guys that are a bit cleverer, that have looked after their bodies, particularly during the time and when they were just before COVID, as long as they've done that well, they've got a better chance of coming out the other side. You look at Bernard Hopkins. I know he's the exception. He calls himself the alien. But the number one reason why Bernard Hopkins went on so long, because no poison went into his body. No alcohol, no drugs, nothing. And this is what these guys, you know, Mickey Duff said it to me years ago. He said, Gary, you've got to give yourself 5 good years of total commitment, because when it's over, Ari, your peak, it is over. Yeah? You don't get your peak years back. So what these guys have got to do is have a real strong sense of resolve and passion for what they're doing. So that's all I can say on that.
So that's for 3 minutes, but we can carry on now. I just wonder about guys who've had the routine broken. You know, guys who've got jobs, guys who train at certain times of a day, or they may train 2 or 3 times a day. All of a sudden, they're getting a steady, regular 350 or 400 quid a week without having to fight. I just wonder if we'll drift away, especially for 30, 31, and they've already missed out on a title.
There's going to be I think there'll be a fair few kids like that lost who have got maybe the British title eliminator status, where they're married, got a couple kids, they've gone and got a job during lockdown. Might not be the job they want, but then they're coming home with £400. They're at home all weekend, and suddenly they're going to fight again. Got to have 6 weeks off that job or pack it up on a ticket deal on a show, and they got to tell the wife that. Then you've got 2 kids. It's not going to happen.
You know who has done really well so far, though? Guys like Jamie Quinn and people like that, these journeymen. I've seen Jamie Quinn more times on TV recently than I've seen him in my life.
What it is, really well. The thing is that they literally, because of the COVID rules and isolation and everything, you got to be really careful where you get your foreign opponent from. You know, because they can't get into the country and have COVID, because that's it. It blows everything up. So everybody's being safer and getting these British kids, these British journeymen, in the bubble quicker. And consequently, that's where we're getting our good fights from.
What do you think about guys being turned around very quickly in this situation? Because we saw Macaulay McGowan a couple of weeks ago get an absolute pasting off a Kazakh guy, and now he's fighting again this Saturday. He's fighting. He's been put on short notice at light middleweight again. That seems to me like I don't like that. Macaulay's a good lad, and he took a real hiding that night, and they're throwing him straight back in.
This is what we're saying again. We're saying again, you know, somebody's got to have the good sense and in their camp to say, right, he's taking a beating, he needs a bit of time out.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, obviously somebody hasn't. Somebody's cashing in, I would imagine.
What about White and Povetkin as well? That was a quick turnaround for both guys. Povetkin didn't come out of that scot-free.
I mean, that was insane. That it's been, you know. I mean, Jesus. I mean, if Povetkin doesn't get COVID, they would have fought 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
which is just unreal. I mean, having said that, we say it's unreal. In the 1920s, 30s,
Here we go.
That would have happened the next week.
Yeah.
Oh, Gary,
yeah.
I'm not going to start talking 1920s and 30s because John and myself will just go off. We'll come back an hour later and you'll be giving education on the 20s and 30s and Fearon might be on the line and that'll be it. Oh, well, I'm lost anyway when Spencer goes on. I love it when these people try to take you on and talk history with you two. And I'm honest about it. I say I haven't got a great knowledge pre-1960s, you know?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's where me and John come in. That's where we come in, man.
But Gary, thanks for coming on this week. Will you come on next month again? Because you've been a brilliant...
Oh, I'd love to, man. I'd love to. Be a pleasure.
And John, thank you very much as always, and we'll chat next week, mate. Maybe...
Yeah, I'll talk to you in a week,
Gary come, we change the format and we talk about general things and talk for longer. I don't know. Maybe we'll change the format down the line because there's a lot Gary could have said there tonight. A lot more that would have interested people.
Good.
Great stuff, guys.
Thanks very much.
See you soon, Gary. Thanks.
You take care.
For all boxing info, news and latest interviews, amateur and pro, across the north, click and subscribe. VIP Boxing Promotions. Also Twitter, Instagram and Facebook.